Now, let's get to this fake budget that'll be coming up in a few days' time. I say fake budget because there's no money bills involved with it, but let's go along anyway. As you know, the great passenger of the Australian economy, the one who tells us everything gets worse before it gets better, gets his chance for half an hour on Tuesday night in front of the country to tell us they've inherited a mess and they're not really going to do anything to fix it, but here we go. Now, of course, there was one very clear promise that was made over and over again during the election. Well, now the rubber hits the road, and guess what? They were lying when they said they could do anything about this.
This cost of living crisis.
From a cost of living
Crisis.
issues of cost of living.
Cost of living.
Cost of living.
Means cost of living is a massive concern.
Cost of living.
Enduring cost of living.
Cost of living.
Cost of living.
Cost of living.
Now, as always, the way that they decide to hide the numbers in the budget is to make things look far rosier a couple of years from now, or far worse than it is a couple of years from now. Have a look at this. This is the inflation predictions that are apparently coming via the budget. We are going to hit, at the end of this year, 8%. But then magically, next financial year, it'll fall to 3%. And then after that, it'll magically fall to 2.5%. Now, that's what they're going to tell you inside the budget papers. Because once you make that little tweak, a whole bunch of other things start to look better. But guess what was admitted to again this weekend? Inflation gets worse before it gets better. In fact, you can now see 150,000 people lose their job because of inflation. Put simply, if everything is more expensive for businesses to do, then that includes having employees. Jim Chalmers' first budget will warn that surging inflation is set to last longer and persist into next year. 150,000 people are projected to lose their jobs as rising interest rates and global economic slowdown fuel a sharp spike in the unemployment rate. Did we not warn you? Did we not tell you? Have we not talked about this every day since the change of government? Because now it matters. They can't spin their way out of it. The idea that we're about to hit generation high inflation and then magically it'll go away in 12 months is, of course, garbage. You also know that Australia's spending power, your real wages, are back in 2011. What's one of those other things they promised over and over again during the election?
Increase the minimum wage.
Workers in our economy need a wage rise.
Give them an extra $1 an hour.
Higher wage opportunities.
High wage jobs.
How we get wage increases.
People on the minimum wage should not go backwards in this country.
So they got the minimum workers, they got their pay rise via the Fair Work Commission, but that's only a couple of million people. As for everyone else, guess what? Real wages go backwards. In fact, do not expect anything even resembling a pay rise in real dollar terms. Not in 2022, not in 2023, but halfway through 2024, unsurprisingly, in the lead up to the 2025 election. On top of all of this, your energy bills will soar by 35% because this idiot and their government decided to make Twitter happy and sign us up to a pledge of more than 80% renewables in the next 7.5 years. The result? All of this has to be built. All of it costs billions. And while everyone in those photos doesn't need to worry because they're either paid for the government or they've got enough money to notice, a lot of other people get smashed. Oh, yeah. And again, rubber hits the road. This was in the Sydney Morning Herald this weekend. It comes via some analysis done by the lefties over at the Grattan Institute. Australians are not expected to reap power bill savings under the clean energy revolution, despite promises of politicians and experts, as governments around the country seize control of a massive infrastructure program needed to modernise the electricity grid and reach net zero greenhouse emissions. That was in the Sydney Morning Herald this weekend. That despite telling you it'll be cheaper, it'll be cheaper, it'll be cheaper, it won't be cheaper. And to build all of this stuff, as opposed to patching what was already there, costs billions of dollars more. I mentioned the Grattan Institute. Here's a report they put out that was referenced by, again, that far right-wing publication, the Sydney Morning Herald today. Renewables-based system are not substantially cheaper than a coal-based system. That's what they said. So you will hear a lot of spin, a lot of BS, a lot of why everything is better than it may well seem or worse than it may well seem. They promise to do something about cost of living. They fiddle on the edges. They promise a pay rise for everyone. The best they can do is for minimum wage workers. But for the millions of other workers, nothing will happen until 6 months before the next federal election. This is, to me, yet again, an absolute underlining of the lies that were very successful, that people wanted to buy into, that in many ways they didn't have to make. We know that the country was ready for a change. We know that people were very aggressive about that change, and the fact that they were willing to put these idiots in charge, along with plenty of teals as well, shows they didn't care what they were getting. Well, I tell you what, people will care what's happening in the next 6 months.